Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. Week 2 of the preseason is here. The Miami Dolphins are hosting the Washington Commandos 1 week after beating the Atlanta Falcons 20-13. Of course, we all know preseason scores don't matter. It's all about seeing our guys taking the field. Joshua Houtz, is it feeling really real yet? Does it feel like football season?
I don't know if it does yet. I don't know if I'm quite, enthralled in it like I'm usually at this point, but I think this is that game that's really going to get us into it. We see the joint practices. So yeah, I think we're slowly getting there. I think this weekend will, almost turn that dial and get us into that. Okay, now it's time. We're getting close to roster cut downs, things like that. But dude, we made it through this far and we're going to continue to get there. So Jake, before we get into this though, how was your birthday, man? Yesterday was my middle daughter. She turned 5, but most importantly to our fans, it was your birthday, Jake. And for the first time since we've been doing this podcast, I actually remembered, which is absolutely that's so sad that it's on my daughter's birthday and Dory Brain still can't remember. So happy birthday, Jake. Did you do anything exciting?
I wish, but being 30, kind of get the stage of you're a little older. And sorry if any of my coworkers listen to this podcast. Weirdly, living in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, I have, I think, 3 coworkers who are all Dolphin fans, so I appreciate every time they listen. But something that happened yesterday, and I don't know how you combat this, because I remember being like 4 years old, and your parents take the videos of your birthdays, and one that stuck with me was everybody singing happy birthday to me during my Thomas the Tank Engine themed birthday. And I just remember hiding my face in a cup because I was so uncomfortable with everyone singing happy birthday to me. And we're sitting there yesterday. We had this great work party up at a golf course by the lake. Like, we do it once a year, and it's a great time. And it happens to land on my birthday. God, man, I wish I had my Thomas the Tank Engine cup, because there's something about seeing 30 people just like standing in front of you singing happy birthday to you. Those 30 seconds, man, they feel like they take forever. It's super uncomfortable. And I want to wrap up this rant by saying I'm very grateful for everybody who did wish me a happy birthday. I'm very grateful that everyone was willing to sing to me. Shout out to everyone who reached out to me on social media. I always appreciate it. But man, it is a tough 30 seconds just having to kind of deal with that and having all the eyes on you. That's probably my highlight of the day. I had some awesome sushi later in the night, but that's probably what I'm going to remember is everybody singing happy birthday to me.
Yeah, I thought it was going to come back and Thomas the Tank Engine was going to haunt you somehow. I might do that. I might have to Photoshop you and Thomas, because that just seems like it'd be the new Abby. But I guess you got some nice Dolphin camp joint practice tweets for your birthday. I guess that's what the Dolphins gave you. I just wonder, Jake, was there ever a time in our lives when we probably sat there and we're like, all these 30 people, they're singing happy birthday to me. This is awesome. Because I feel like even as a young Houtz or young Jake, we're probably like, come on, let's get this thing over with.
I think that's kind of the point, though, right? Because your birthday generally is a good day, right? Cake, you're seeing everybody, friends, and all those things can mush together a little bit. So maybe there needs to be like 30 seconds of like fear, 30 seconds of trauma, just be like, you're going to remember this birthday. Every birthday is great, but we need to give you a true reason to remember, and that's by scaring you. So that might be part of it. But Josh, how was it in the Houtz household? What was the biggest gift? Let's hear that.
She's all about Super Kitties, and no one knows what Super Kitties is. So, well, maybe some do know what Super Kitties is. Yeah, it's just a Disney show about these Super Kitties. They run fast. So I might do a Tyreek Hill highlight with the Super Kitty song, but they got some Super Kitty gifts and Super Kitty gifts. And we went to Hershey Park for like the second time in a week. So I am absolutely over Hershey Park, but she's 5 now. So I have a 7, a 5-year-old, and I still have a little 2-year-old, but my God, man, they're growing up fast.
2 in elementary school, man. That's coming in? Did the school start for you guys yet?
Not yet. It'll be what? I guess it's it'd be a week from Monday, so it's coming close. And I just think, is that going to make it easier to these podcasts? Is it going to make it harder? I think it should be easier. And I'm getting close to when they're all off at school. It's going to be sad, but being able to talk Dolphins football without me having to throw unicorns into another room might not be so bad.
The last thing, Josh, before we get into this preseason game, can I hold you to that as a birthday present? Can I get that Thomas the Tank Engine avatar? Because I think New Year, you gave me the Captain Crunch avatar I've been using, and I think New Year, new Abby to really set the tone. I want to cash that in and take you up on it.
It's a deal, and we'll make sure it's everything you can imagine, everything you're picturing in your head and more. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that, folks.
Today is all about questions we want answered in week 2 of the preseason. And Josh, back in my day, there were 4 preseason games. And the idea was week 3 was the dress rehearsal. You'd see maybe a quarter in week 2. Week 3, you'd see that very, very valuable half of football from your starters. I think for me, man, I go back and I still remember that first preseason game with Bill Lazor. And I think it was Brandon Gibson moved in motion before the snap. And it was the year after that it was the go versus go, go. Go, go was meant that Ryan Tannehill and the Dolphins were running the football. Go meant the Dolphins were throwing the football. And if we could hear that on the broadcast at home, I have to imagine that the people in the game felt something about that too. But I'm going to reel it back in a little bit, Josh, and jump on some news here real quick. To start, some injury news. Keon Smith, he is done for the season with a torn ACL. He was getting some practice at left guard. Currently, Robert Jones is slated as the first stringer there. Cat, who's been on the show quite a bit, he's going to be back with us next week to do a 53-man roster 3.0. We're going to actually then finish with a 4.0. But Josh, I bring that up because Cat was a big fan of Keon Smith. He liked his versatility, thought he had some potential at left tackle, but done for the year, getting some snaps at left guard. Who are you looking for at that position?
At left guard, or I guess in Keon Smith's place. So at left guard, I mean, I think at this point we're going to hopefully see Liam Eichenberg, step up and be that guy. Jack Driscoll's looked nice, so I guess them, and then Patrick Paul, right? You're talking about left tackle. It just sucks that we lost a guy on the offensive line that can play various positions, because it did seem like he was more of a left tackle and he was playing inside this camp. So Houtz had a young player that showed promise is out, but next man up, right? And we're going to see a next man up whether we like it or not.
Robert Jones is currently listed as the starting left guard. Liam Eichenberg's listed as the starting right guard, with Jack Driscoll listed as the backup right guard. So Eichenberg's been taking some snaps at center with Aaron Brewer out, but man, there's a lot of moving pieces here. Matthew Jones, a 25-year-old rookie, is the backup left guard at the moment, and Chasen Hines, 2-year vet, he's been floating around on the Dolphins roster. Came out of LSU. He's 24 years old. So that'll be something worth watching, because right now the Dolphins have 90 players listed on the roster. Liam Eichenberg isn't listed as one of the centers yet. When Brewer went down, he was one of the first players to go over and start snapping the football. So a lot of things are going to change in terms of the cross-training. Nick Needham's one of those guys who I think kind of sticks out to me, who, as we see more and more, we're going to see, is he actually, he's listed as a cornerback, but maybe he's going to play some safety, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how the Dolphins overcome losing someone like Keon Smith, someone they've invested a lot of time into, hoping to see him develop. A little bit of a surprise, Josh, early in camp. Teair Tart was a player that the Dolphins decided to cut. There was a running joke through a lot of the offseason. The Dolphins signed maybe 20 free agents, and half of them were defensive tackles. Chris Grier really went all out, signing a bunch of different guys. Teair Tart, he was cut by the Titans. He spent time with the Texans, was just really looking for that place that he could call home, where he'd fit and everything would work out. Apparently that's not going to be Miami.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate too much, but it does sound like he comes, he's had some, I guess, attitude issues, whether it be with the Titans. So maybe there was something there, but whatever it is, where the Dolphins got rid of him for something, that happened behind the scenes, or whether it was his play. I mean, you have to feel pretty good, or at least you have to see that there's some promise in that room, right? I mean, I've talked about Benito Jones before. I believe he's actually listed as the starter inside next to, between Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell, kind of sandwiched in there. Deshaun Hand stepped up. I had a few other guys listed here. Jonathan Harris, I mean, we saw him play. Leonard Payne Jr. and Acorn showed up. Isaiah Mack had a fumble that landed right into his hands. So there are definitely some names out there that are young players still pushing to, make a name for themselves. Neville Gallimore is another one. So, again, whatever this means for that Dolphins defensive line, I hope it means that one of those young players is stepping up. And shame on me, Jake, Brandon Peely, one of your guys that you've been talking about for forever. I mean, he's listed, I think, right behind them on the depth chart. So some promise there, and I hopefully, Teair Tart, whatever the issue is there, he can fix it, because there is some promise when he does have everything right. Just doesn't sound like right now is that time, at least not for the Dolphins. And glad that they're just cutting ties, right away, not screwing around, letting those young players get their reps.
Neville Gallimore is a name I kind of like, who, as we go through these last two games, I think can really make some noise and maybe have an impact in the interior of the defensive line. Josh, Benito Jones is listed as that starter, returning to Miami. He got his start here. He's probably one of the older guys in this group with Neville Gallimore. Who do you think is your leading favorite here right now? Maybe not to start, but you have Benito Jones there. Somebody you're expecting to hear their name more and more as, the preseason wraps up and we start getting ready for the regular season.
Yeah, so I think I've been pretty stoked on Benito Jones, but I'm not going to go there. I won't cop out and go that way. So, Jonathan Harris, I think that's another player that's been on the roster. I've had some, there's definitely some clips out there of me posting of him of some tackles for loss, things like that. He's shown some promise. So, without taking your player, if you were going to go Brandon Peely, I think I'll go with, maybe Jonathan Harris or, again, I liked what Leonard Payne Jr. did. I don't know if we talked about him enough. We know, I think he's, his father played ball. So he comes from that type of, background where, he can potentially be that Phil. So I think I'll go with those guys.
Julian, so that's it. That's all I got for news, Josh. Did you have anything else? I was super excited to start talking about tight ends.
No, yeah, no, I think that was it.
So we're going to break through some questions that we have for week 2 of the regular season. And as I got to thinking, Josh, it kind of feels like a lot of my questions are like, who are you sitting with at lunch? Remember in, middle and high school, we actually had a weird scenario where it was wherever you sit that first day of lunch, you're stuck there for the rest of the year. So God forbid there's 8 spots at a table and some random person sits with all your friends and then you're just stuck at a table for the whole year. But I thought that'd kind of be this project. Did you have a similar experience, or was it kind of a free-for-all for you guys? Because that sucked
I
for
think
us in middle school.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds awful. Then you're just like it's like musical chairs and you're rushing down there. You don't even care what you're getting to eat that day. So
One
yeah,
shot, yeah.
I think we were able to kind of navigate around, and I believe the cafeteria might have been big enough that was an issue. But damn, dude, that definitely sucks if you're locked in on day one.
Because there's a lot of things that's going to happen over the next month. The Dolphins can have 16 players on the practice squad. A lot of that practice squad can be veterans, so you can kind of use it a little more to your advantage instead of just like stowing acorns for the season. So my first question, or the first thing I want to learn come Saturday night, is what lunch table is Julian Hill going to be sitting at? Is Julian Hill someone entering his second season who is he going to be up there? Is he going to be sitting with Durham Smythe? Is he going to be sitting with Jonnu Smith at the big kids table? Or is this going to be a scenario where come to Saturday night, we're still going to be learning about Julian Hill, what his plan is going to be for the Dolphins this year, where maybe we're still trying to figure things out and he's going to be sitting with Jody Fortson and Tanner Connor. And that's where my thought process started, Josh. But then I also think it's worth noting that Jody Fortson was in a non-contact, one of the red jerseys at practice. And Tanner Connor, after leading the team in receiving yards last week, he was pretty banged up as well. So this is kind of twofold in the sense of, do you think Julian Hill is someone who's kind of solidified his spot on the 53, one of those starters who Mike McDaniel's game planning for? And on top of that, do you think maybe it could be the Julian Hill show come Saturday night just because of these other injuries the Dolphins are dealing with in the depth chart?
Yes and yes. I'm good with all of that. I think Julian Hill has proven. I think you made a great case from on a previous pod, a couple months ago, and then I think you took him off your 53-man roster for whatever reason. They've been developing him, right? We saw him, come along last year. We can see him in the run game, as a protector or a run blocker, things like that. But now he's, becoming another element in the passing game and things like that. We saw him with the orange jersey on. I think Wingfield said at one point there was a 2 tight end formation that had him and I believe maybe Durham on the field, and they were running Chris Brooks in the red zone. I mean, that just sounded like, that sounded like meat on meat and potatoes. Yeah, I should probably censor this. I don't know if he deleted his tweet, but yeah, I think Julian Hill's proven that he is that third tight end, maybe eventually taking over for Durham Smythe, proven this season that maybe he can be more of a pass catcher. So I think he solidified himself there. I just want to see what comes after that. Like you mentioned, Fortson, very promising. Connor, 3 catches, 70 yards last week. I think he had a concussion and was banged up. One of those guys you mentioned, you can maybe stack on the practice squad. Do they keep one of them? Hayden, everyone was going crazy over what Hayden Rucci was doing in the run game. So damn, dude, loaded unit. Definitely excited to see the way it plays out. But I think Julian Hill's sitting at the grown-up table for this one.
So this Jonnu Smith, Durham Smythe, Julian Hill, that's 3. How many tight ends do the Dolphins keep on the 50? I know it's so hard because I could totally see like Jody Fortson make the practice squad and maybe have like a 3-game stretch. Let's say like weeks 8 through 11, he has like 3 straight games without a touchdown. I would not surprise me at all, but maybe it's like 4. Well, wasn't there like a Jerome Bettis stat line where he had 3 carries for 3 touchdowns and like 1 yard or something like that? I could see Jody Fortson being that type of guy for this offense. I really could.
I love that. A Jerome Bettis callback. Didn't they used to make like an NFL game day game? I'm not getting too sidetracked here. Okay. Yeah. Jerome Bettis, man. That would be great. I do think it's interesting though. He's ahead of Tanner Connor on the practice squad. Cause we talked about investing time in Julian Hill. They've invested time in Tanner Connor. So if they truly believe Fortson has that, inside, the inside, thing on that, I mean, then maybe we do see him. I do think they keep 4 though. I do think I had 4 in both the previews that we did, but we're gonna come back next week and do one, and I'll probably have only 3.
What do you got for your first question, Mr. Houtz?
Yeah, I'm trying to go backwards. I'm trying to go with some of my, the least favorite to the top. So I copped out last week. I'll be the first one to admit it. I copped out and did not have Channing Tindall as one of those players I really wanted to step up. But I want to see where Channing Tindall belongs in this unit. Okay, we looked at what the Dolphins have there at the linebacking unit. We talk about how this is probably the best inside linebacker tandem that we've had in years. Jordan Brooks, David Long Jr. But what are they going to do? Are they going to get some reps out there? I mean, they've kind of been in and out of the lineup in practice. I don't know how much they did in joint practices because again, I was at Hershey Park, last night. But I want to see what the starters can do. But then more importantly, I want to see if Channing Tindall can truly, push Duke Riley, which it seems like everyone's talking about Duke Riley versus Channing Tindall. Whether that's the battle or not, it seems from the outside perspective that it is. So is Channing Tindall fit to be on the 53-man roster? Has he done enough? We saw him blitzing last week. Nicely timed blitz, might you, but it was against second and third stringers. So let's see what he can do. And most importantly, again, I want to see what those starters can do because the sky's the limit for them. But until they're out there, it just seems like another one of those Odell Beckham Jr.'s, those signings that, you were waiting to see before you believe.
So Channing Tindall is currently listed as a third stringer, and fourth stringer Curtis Bolton actually got a lot of good press following last week's game. I think he actually tied Patrick McMorris for the team high in tackles. So, Josh, I love this pick. I think Channing Tindall, there's going to be opportunity here in these last 2 preseason games. And another thing, man, like you mentioned the second and third stringers, but I'm going to talk about this more later, but the Dolphins, I don't think it's luck, but you have Michael Penix Jr., and now you have Jaden Daniels, 2 rookie quarterbacks who – it's not a debate. The preseason doesn't matter. We aren't learning like revolutionary game-changing stuff. But what we are seeing is quarterbacks that need every single rep they can get. So when you see someone like Channing Tindall lining up as quote unquote the quarterback of the defense against whether it's Michael Penix Jr., maybe Jaden Daniels is still out there, that is a great opportunity for him to go show. And then we can come back next week, Josh, and say, well, actually, after it was second and third stringers, we're talking about quarterbacks who are going to be starting in week 1. So Channing Tindall, man, is looking like one of those guys. Anthony Walker Jr., I think, was absolutely awesome early in camp. I haven't really heard his name too much lately. Not saying he's a risk to not make the roster or anything like that, but if someone's name isn't being called, that's opportunity for someone else. So Channing Tindall, whether it's blitzing, maybe he makes a play or 2 as a linebacker. The Commandos have a great rookie tight end, really versatile, and Ben Sinnott. Zach Ertz, I think, is actually going to be a big part of that offense. So, hey, let's see what you got, Channing Tindall, man. It's time for you to show that you were worthy of that third-round pick, and this is going to be a great opportunity when you have the up-and-coming offense that direly needs every single rep it can find.
Yeah, we may as well throw Zeke Vandenberg out there too. He's listed as a linebacker, and we want to see what he can do. But I'm glad you brought up Ben Sinnott because I had him listed on there and Zach Ertz as well. And then I guess you could even go with their running backs, Brian Robinson out in the backfield. So there's going to be some plays to be made. How does Channing Tindall do fill in that gap, coming down with a sure tackle on a Brian Robinson? I guess the biggest thing to me is I just wish we knew how much these guys are going to play because you're talking about Jaden Daniels. I mean, how many years, Jacob, we've been haunted by these, quote unquote mobile quarterbacks? Is he going to be able to use those legs or is he going to be nerfed a bit? Because, the Dolphins game plan would be much, much different. And then Channing Tindall could be strained much differently as well. So I had to put Channing Tindall on this one because I overlooked him in the last one. Jake, what's next on your list of things to watch this coming week?
Oh boy, I got a tweet from Travis to read to you, my friend. Travis Wingfield of the Miami Dolphins. He tweeted out on, I think this was Thursday. Eric Ezukama wide open on a slant. Skyler finds him, but it's off his chest and incomplete. Off his hands. It happens all the time, man. But there is no, if it bounces off, there's no sadder play in all of football than a ball that, maybe if it bounces off your helmet. If we're going to do a sad meter, we're going to start, I think, don't get me wrong, these are all sad, but hands at the lowest, and then helmet, and then I think chest is at the top for the sad meter. And I don't know if it was a little bit of a PR move by the Dolphins here, but they also published a video of Eric Ezukama going up and making a one-handed catch the same day. So there's a little bit of a spotlight here on Eric Ezukama. He's been struggling with a neck injury. He missed a lot of last season, but Josh, you and I both know that this is somebody who the reason we continue talking about him, despite playing only a handful of games through his 2-year NFL career, entering year 3, he has one preseason game every year that just has our jaw drop, whether it's his ability as a runner, whether it's his ability just to kind of move the change as a big body receiver. And on top of that, Mike McDaniel listed him as the fastest player. I guess they track every player during practice via GPS. And at 6'2", Eric Ezukanma was the fastest player on Thursday. And so this is about 2 minutes of me ranting that we're seeing the traits, we're seeing the talent. Can he put it all together and earn one of those final wide receiver roster spots?
I hope that's all I can say, right? I mean, I can say I hope because we're sitting here and you're right. It's like every time the weather starts to change, football's getting back in the air preseason, and here comes Eric Ezukanma looking like Jerry Rice or something. You've 6'2", man. You're right. He brings a different, type of mold almost to what this offense could use. But is he someone that they're going to give a roster spot to? When you look at how loaded it is right now, right? We got Malik Washington. I think we all basically said they'd have 6? They'd keep 6 receivers. Maybe that changes. Odell Beckham Jr. does sound like he could start maybe the season on PUP list. So maybe that opens something up here. I know Tua Tagovailoa said that all they've been doing is just spot catching. So I don't know how far away Odell Beckham Jr. is, but when you look at some of these guys, maybe you keep Eric Ezukanma around. Wow, you give Odell Beckham Jr. time to come back out there and be that factor late in the season, because then, oh my God, could you imagine that? But you're right, man. You have to be excited about what I almost call him Deebo Samuel, Eric Ezukanma can do, because we've seen him almost in that role, in the motions, taking some of those sweeps, looking like an absolute bona fide stud. And then, as you reminded me, Jake, it was all in preseason. So I would hope that he can stick. I'd love to see him, rise up that depth chart. He's behind Anthony Schwartz right now. Willie Snead and Braylon Sanders are also both above Malik Washington. So there's a lot of guys there. Again, I think this is reindeer games. Don't put too much into this, but if it comes down to Eric Ezukanma and Malik Washington, Jake, that's the one where then I might need a coin, and then it's hard, man.
How many clips would you say you made after the first game, Josh? How many Twitter clips would you say you've posted
on Twitter? This last Falcons game, I probably not a lot. A lot of them I've actually have on my drive, and I'm just like, I'm not even gonna post them. I don't know why. I just haven't posted them.
But you have like a loaded chamber of I've watched this game and I got some clips, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So when we look at last week and Mike White averaging 1.9 yards per attempt, and when we look at Kyrick McGowan go 2 for 6, Malik Washington go 1 for 4, Willie Snead and Braylon Sanders combined to go 0 for 7, is that a quarterback thing? Is that Mike White's issue? Somebody who's actually produced quote unquote in the NFL? Like he's thrown this isn't someone who's so terrible he can't throw. He's thrown an NFL touchdown. We gotta feather
Jets fans have. I think Jets fans have T-shirts for him too, right?
Actually, I think, that was during all the Zach Wilson drama. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is this something where we could see Eric Ezukanma take the field Saturday night? And are we being too homerish if I say, I remember after watching week 1, Saran Neal, it's the Dolphins didn't play 40 players against the Atlanta Falcons. And Saran Neal looked like he should have been one of those 40 just for the sake of he stood out. He looked like he was on a different level than all these rookies, maybe second-year players trying to find their footing. He looked like he was the speed that was just making the rest of the field a blur. Could this be a scenario where the Dolphins don't have a lot of depth at wide receiver, where we're hyping up these guys Malik Washington? He had the great end around, but he's a 5'9" rookie. He had 1 reception on 4 attempts for I think 5 yards. Do we need to have a longer conversation about this wide receiver group, or could it be a scenario where Eric Ezukanma comes in, Mike White looks a little better, and they're moving the football?
I hope it's more of that, but you're talking to me and you're just asking if we're overhyping these wide receivers, and I'm like, yeah, clearly I am. Clearly that's my entire brand. So it's hard for me to sit here and say that we're not overhyping them, because you're right. I mean, Mike White probably looked bad, but equally as bad were probably those receivers trying to get separation and things like that. So yeah, man, hopefully that answers our questions answered this week. But to that point, Eric Ezukanma already looked like a god with Skylar Thompson. So there should be no excuses, right, for the two of them not to be right back on check. And, oh, that unicorn's back. So yes, Jake, I don't think there should be any issues with that.
Miami's top 4 wide receivers right now are Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, River Craycraft, and Braxton Berrios. I think McDaniel said Waddle's dealing with something very minor, and he's not expected to be gone too long. And then Odell Beckham, man, I don't want to compare him to anyone. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm not going to say that he's never going to play a snap. I think he's going to play a role on this team. But the fact he's got to flame fans on Twitter makes me a little concerned. And then it's the next day we see him out on the side running routes. Like, it's just bad optics. I'm very in on Odell Beckham Jr. I'm very in on hopefully what he's going to do for this team. But seeing is believing, and I can't wait to see him out there. Josh, what's next on your list?
Yeah, before we turn the page on that, I just want to say Odell Beckham Jr. I think it's time we just start viewing him as that DLC content that's going to get released later in the year and just pray that it actually happens, right?
Don't cancel don't cancel the whole business before we get another DSCL. I love that.
Oh God, that's happened before, hasn't it? All right, so for me, it's Miami's secondary, right? We continued, and again, I really, really wish that we could hear who is starting and who's not, because when you look at what the Commandos have on the offensive side of the football, I mean, they got some playmakers. You mentioned Jaden Daniels. I think, again, barely scrolling the timeline yesterday, I think he almost tore things up in the red zone. The Dolphins looked almost unstoppable. So will Jalen Ramsey play? I'm going to chalk that up as maybe not, right? He wasn't out there at joint practices. I'm probably not going to think he's out there. Javon Holland as well. So I want to see Kendall Fuller. He was wearing that orange jersey. He's going to get revenge. Him versus, scary Terry McLaurin, one of the better, receivers in football. Jahan Dotson against Ethan Bonner I'd written down. Luke McCaffrey, slot receiver, Cater Kohu and him and Nick Needham, things like that. And then you got Storm Duck. We want to see what he can do. I really wish Kat was on here to talk about Isaiah Johnson, because that was a player that he really saw some things out of. And then Jason Maitre. I had to make sure I said that right. I almost called him Mater D. Jason Maitre made some plays last week as well. So how do they match up? How does the Dolphins secondary match up? And then I'm not even talking about safeties. Jordan Poyer finally came back. If we didn't have Patrick Morris last week, who do we have out there? Elijah Campbell, Marcus May, maybe our starters this week. So I just want to see who can show that they belong on this 53-man roster and which of these players rises up against, again, one of the better receiving corps in all of football.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because I was actually reading a quote that the Commanders actually have a wide receiver 2 battle going on between Jahan Dotson and Olamide Zaccheaus. My apologies if I butchered it. I actually think I did decent on that. One, it's a little surprising because Jahan Dotson was a high pick, but another reason I want to mention that for everyone doing fantasy football, don't go all in on Dotson just yet, because it seems like the Commanders are still trying to work things out. And that kind of speaks to what we want to see out of the Dolphins, because they too are trying to work things out. You mentioned Will Fuller. I think when he was wearing the orange jersey, they ended the joint practice by him with an interception, a dagger as to end practice. I thought that was awesome. I think Marcus May also had an interception and went and celebrated with Tyreek Hill shortly after, went and celebrated with the offense, which is pretty cool. But man, this is my number one viewing pleasure come Saturday night. The Atlanta Falcons threw the ball 40 times last week. I'm looking for something a little similar with the Washington Commanders, and it's just going through that entire list. Last week, we didn't see Cam Smith take the field. It seems like that's something we're going to see this week. He's back at practice. I think it's kind of interesting because Anthony Weaver last week was talking about the importance of Cam Smith redeveloping his confidence. And then Kendall Fuller came out and said the same thing. He needs to go out there and play with instincts. He's got the talent. So there's a full armada of players just ready to boost up Cam Smith and give him that confidence. And I'm not going to lie, Josh. I'm not always going to be able to rewatch film and, point out what's happening in the trenches and see which offensive lineman won. But wide receiver versus cornerback's a little bit easier, man. It's a little more fun to kind of just see that one clip of Storm Duck going up and battling a wide receiver one-on-one. And I love those type of opportunities in the preseason. This is my favorite matchup. You mentioned it. I don't think Jalen Ramsey is going to play. Ethan Bonner, Storm Duck, Saran Neal, Cam Smith. Those are my favorite players to follow this preseason. Just the momentum they've grown. I just don't think a lot of teams run the football a lot in preseason. They're trying to figure out things in the passing game, and we should just use that to our advantage to watch these cornerbacks. And you look at a group, Nick Needham, Cater Kohu. Miami has success finding these undrafted guys. They have success developing guys. And as you start to pay Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa more money, you're going to have to lean into this development process a lot more. And it's hard not to be excited about the Storm Ducks and the Ethan Bonners of the world.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Neal, too. For some reason, I overlooked him because he was that superstar player that we saw last week. And to your point, these teams are, Jaden Daniels, right? If he goes out there and plays any sort of time, they're going to want to see what he can do with that rock in his hand, right? They want to get him some passing reps. and things like that. So we talked about the corners, the safeties. I also had written down. I tried to look all the secondary together, but I want to see Patrick Morris if he can really, come back out there as well and build on what he did last week. Because I mean, it seems like Chris Greer, you mentioned it, find these acorn corners, but he also seems to find these late round safeties that seem to hang around the league forever and make some noise. So again, maybe we should say this entire defense as a whole, because Anthony Weaver's defense last week was definitely a breath of fresh air, what we saw. So hopefully in this cornerback unit kind of sorts itself out, and hoping that they can shut down, again, a very good Washington Commandos unit.
Jalen Phillips, Josh, probably not. I mean, nothing's been said, but just based on Mike McDaniel and knowing how this team operates, Phillips was taken off of PUP. I think he was actually padded up practicing, but it's hard to imagine them throwing him out there for the second preseason game, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine. It'd be crazy. I couldn't imagine coming off PUP though this early, right? So never say never, but yeah, I can't expect him out there.
Last week, the Dolphins only played two quote-unquote edge guys in the sense of Emmanuel Ogbah and Quentin Bell. Quentin Bell, I think, only played 15 snaps, so that's another one that I'm a little interested in. Can this Miami pass rush really start to get going against a Washington Commanders team where last year, Josh, the Commandos were kind of like the 2015 or so Jacksonville Jaguars, where they were always behind, so you'd have Sam Howell throwing for like 400 yards a game. He got sacked a bunch. So I'm interested to see if Miami can kind of be bullies in the defensive front here. And on top of that, man, like Chop Robinson, we should see. Have you heard anything about Mohamed Kamara? That's one guy I might have just not done my research on, because we didn't see him last week. I don't think he was right back out there practicing. So that's one name to keep your eye on. But I think Robinson's going to be out there playing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought Mo Kamara was back, but I'm not up to date as much as I could have been. But Chop Robinson definitely sounds like he's ready to go. And I believe it was Omar Kelly said, he's looked great, but he's still not quite a 3-down player, which you can't imagine any rookie being at this
Not
point.
this
But
year.
just to be a pass rush specialist, just to see what he can do, when he's hanging over a center, and whatever different looks are giving, sign us up. Last week, we absolutely want to see Chop Robinson. Finally seems like we'll get it this week. And like you mentioned, Quentin Bell, man, is he going to add on those days that we keep hearing about? Is he going to look like that absolute monster attacking the quarterback? Questions to be answered.
One of my favorite things you said last podcast, Josh, you brought up how Jalen Phillips was frustrated that he wasn't a 3-down player as a rookie. And if it wasn't for the injury issues, he was going to be the first defensive end, that first pass rusher taken in that draft. So something to keep in mind here, no matter where you're taken in that first round, playing on the edge is so damn hard, where I don't think it's really fair to expect Chop this year to be that 3-down player. And since we're here on the edge, Josh, did you see that the Dolphins were sniffing around Matthew Judon before he got traded to the Falcons?
That's crazy. Yeah, I now that you bring that up, Dory Brain does remember. Yeah, so that they're in on everyone, aren't they? They truly are. And if they would have landed that, I would have lost my mind. That would have been a little crazy. I don't like those in-depth, those interdivision trades. Do you?
Usually, no. I remember being a Red Sox fan, and the Red Sox traded, I think it might have been like Ramiro Mendoza from the Yankees at the time, and he came to the Sox and he was just garbage. And then he didn't play well. I'm sorry. And then he was even worse when they played against the Yankees. So I felt like he was like getting paid under the table by the Yankees. So I do kind of feel that, where you don't want to do it, and then you have the bad taste in your mouth where it's like a Wes Welker situation where we got a second round pick. You guys got a Hall of Famer. Yeah, let's go. That type of thing. But yeah, man, no, I completely agree with that there.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not that same situation. That'd be bad.
Another group, Josh, that I think is going to be a little interesting is the running back position. The Dolphins are still a hot mess at the offensive line, but Mike McDaniel's proven it don't matter. We're going to be one of the best running teams in football. The Dolphins currently have 6 running backs battling between Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, Jeff Wilson Jr., Salvon Ahmed, Chris Brooks, and Jalen Wright. Josh, is this going to continue to be the Jalen Wright show? Are those dynasty values, the stock's going to keep going up and up here?
Yeah, I don't know how much we'll see Mostert, right? And maybe even Devon Achane. I don't know that you really risk him at this point. They're both listed as the starters on the depth chart. So, yeah, I think we continue to ride on this Jalen Wright train, maybe give him, 15 touches or carries this week. Last week he looks like an absolute stud. What was it? 10 carries, 55 yards, touchdown. And then that play where he shifted field. So, we'll be more of that. But I want to see Chris Brooks as well. I still think he can push Jeff Wilson out. I don't want to say out the door. It sounds rude, but I still think he can push Jeff Wilson to be that quote unquote bowling pin or bowling ball, that thunder in the middle of that running back unit. So That's what I want to see.
It might have been an Underdog podcast. I apologize that I forgot this, but I saw someone say that after Jeff or somebody was on a podcast talking about how after Jeff Wilson scored the touchdown there, they said future Dallas Cowboys starting running back Jeff Wilson, which kind of piqued my interest a little bit in the sense of, are the Dolphins going to really spend the start of these games maybe trying to find a new home for Jeff Wilson, something like that? We know nothing. This is full like Pepe Sylvia here. Like, we don't know for sure. But Josh, it's so hard when you see Chris Brooks run so strong. He's looking great after his injury. You see that they traded the future pick for Jalen Wright. You see those two guys running well, and you see Jeff Wilson have 5 carries for 7 yards. Yes, he did have the receiving touchdown, but man, like, I want to see more Brooks and Wright. Like, sorry.
Yeah, and it's nothing against Jeff Wilson, nothing at all. But yeah, we want to see those young guys, those acorns, those guys that we've, my Chris Brooks, I put a Chris Brooks highlight tape up from last preseason. Like, there's still like people that click on it, like comment. I'm like, okay, there's a Chris Brooks hive out there. So I think we might be part of that, Jake.
You should do a throw remember the name on, get a little Chris Brooks highlight reel going, and everyone's going to absolutely love him. Josh, that's everyone I wanted to talk about. I think for me, cornerback just seems like such a fun matchup, especially hopefully we get maybe Jaden Daniels for a half. The Commanders actually have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Marcus Mariota, so that means there's going to be another veteran quarterback getting some snaps. Jeff Driscoll, he's been in the league for a little bit, and Sam Hartman. God, the name rings a bell. I'm going to stall a little bit as I click on his name.
He's like the handsome late round rookie from Notre Dame that everyone like gushes over. I get him and the one that they had last year mixed up all the time.
Sam Howell. The Sam I Ams.
Okay, so it was the Sam. Okay, yeah, the Sam I Ams. I guess that does make sense. Well, Jake, if you touched on all yours, I mean, I thought you were trying to set me up. I was going to start with this at the beginning of the podcast, but I think this is a perfect segue. We're talking about the running back unit, but the only way that running back unit can really work is with that offensive line, right? And you talked about the injury to Aaron Brewer. I don't think we're going to see him. So who slides in right away at center? What do we see here? It sounds like it's Liam Eichenberg by all accounts, but like you said, the depth chart suggests otherwise. I think Jack Driscoll played a little bit last week, looked very good, but the thing that stuck out to me, and it was a comment from Tua, and I don't think he was throwing shade or anything about the drop snaps, but he did say that him and Brewer were just getting in rhythm, but with everything they're dealing with, it's now on to Liam. He had Liam the entirety of last year, so I have the utmost faith and confidence that he'll be able to get back to doing what we need to do. I mean, you can see it out there, not a lot of drop snaps, if any, so it's been really good. I think he chuckled when he said that. So Liam Eichenberg sounds like he could be the starting center, then who plays guard, things like that. It's just a constant trickle-down effect that I want to see. And then Patrick Paul. I mean, he looked like an absolute mauler last week, stood out on the film. He's going to be going against a defensive line that consists of, Cleveland Farrell. I hope I didn't butcher that. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Johnny Newton, who a lot of us were high on in the draft, so there are some players there that I want to see Patrick Paul just completely move to the second and third level. So a lot of things to see on that offensive line kind of play out. That's what I want to see most, Jake, this week. And that's coming from a guy that's not very good at sitting here and breaking down the offensive line.
Dude, it was so cool that the Dolphins did like 4 straight plays where it was just Jalen Wright go run behind Patrick Paul. It was like they kind of isolated it as like a practice scenario because it just happened like 4 straight plays and the Dolphins had success for it. I kind of like Mike McDaniel preseason play calling where he does kind of play like a little bit of Madden where like, oh, you can't beat this play, huh? I'm going to keep running this play until you beat it. So I completely agree with you, man. I think Patrick Paul is fitting right in. I'm going to be super excited to see him just get more snaps, get more reps, be more comfortable, and get that opportunity to attack and eat safeties, eat cornerbacks at the second level, because that's why he was brought to Miami. A lot of the snap issues I noticed too, when the Dolphins signed Sean Harlow, in terms of, because I think it was all the centers that were having like just issues, just yeeting them over quarterback heads. I think Harlow's really calmed things down too, as maybe a second or third string center by the time things get going. But Josh, I think it's important to keep in mind too, and not you specifically, but with these 2 first depth charts, not a lot has changed. So I think maybe after game 2 is when we might. Actually, do you think by after game 2 we'll even see some shuffles, or will we have to wait till after that third preseason game?
I mean, you'd think probably the third preseason game, right? I mean, we can see little tiny movements here, I think maybe, but I don't think we're going to see anything crazy by the time. It seems like the offensive line solidified. I guess the thing that we all want to know is how healthy are these guys, right? How far along is Teron Armstead? We're not going to see him this week. We're probably not going to see him at all this preseason. I think he got out there for a little bit of the joint practices, but how far along is he, right? I mean, and then you got Robert Jones, who I believe has been banged up. Austin Jackson, you're probably not going to want to see a lot of. So I don't know, man. I want to see those backups because, like you mentioned at the top of this thing, Keon Smith going down, that definitely had a little bit of a trickle down effect in that depth chart.
And development, man. Like, I go back to it again. Development is so important for these guys. So, like, the Dolphins are investing in the players and the potential instead of just, like, going out and spending the $22 million they have in cap space. You see guys like Laken Tomlinson, who could have gone to the Dolphins and been a guy, but I see him getting thrown around like a rag doll at practice too. Like, it's important to keep these things in mind that the Dolphins are going to have to develop players. They're going to have to make chicken salad out of whatever they can find when you're spending so much money to keep some high-end guys like the Tyreek Hills, the Bradley Chubbs, and the Tua Tagovailoas around. So it's really important to kind of focus in on especially that interior offensive line and pray and hope Butch Berry, Frank Smith, Mike McDaniel, these guys can really start to develop these guys because the Dolphins are going to need those playmakers inside. That's about it, Josh. I don't know if there was anyone else I wanted to mention. Do you have any closing thoughts here before we send everyone off to have a good weekend?
No, I think we pretty much touched on the entire roster. I mean, maybe we see some more out of the kickoff. You know, we still have Berrios and Achane down there listed. I want to see Malik Washington maybe house one of those. But yeah, man, it's just nice to have football back. Nice to see the way this entire thing's going to slowly come together. I think I did sugarcoat this whole thing though, because honestly, Jake, like you mentioned, it's the interior offensive line. It's Eichenberg. If he's playing center, I'm queasy as hell about that. Yep. We still got the Brian Baldinger in our head with Aaron Brewer. So it's the interior that really is queasy and makes this number one on my list.
Josh, you have said it all, my friend. I hope everybody out there has a wonderful weekend. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We will be back to recap the game with everything we learned early next week. But until then, go enjoy the sun, have a wonderful weekend, and most importantly, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.